Hey Terraria fans, welcome back to another World Tour video. It's been a little while since our last one because I've been a little bit busy, but if you are unfamiliar with how these work, I like to highlight a few builds, show them off, and really dig into some of the thinking about how I made that build and also all of the materials that I use. So if you're familiar with any of my speed builds, this is going to be a really good way for you to see some of those builds, but in a bit more detail and with a bit more sort of instruction about what I did. So realistically, this is not exactly a how-to, but it gives you some insights into, well, how to. So let's dive in. So what we'll be diving into are these two builds right here. Now, if you've seen these, they're already on the channel as speed builds, so you can find those on the channel, or I'll just try to remember to put a link down below. But basically, each build here has its own unique features. The first one is the Avengers Tower, or Stark Tower build, and the second one is from the show Adventure Time. It's the sort of big tree fort thing that I guess they live in. I'm not really sure, I don't watch the show. Now, with all that being said, guys, if you are enjoying any of the content on the channel, feel free to hit the like, the subscribe, or the little dinner bell thingy so you can know when the next video hits the old YouTube universe. Okay, that's enough for me. Let's get to the builds. Alright folks, so here we are at the first build. This is the Treehouse from Adventure Time. Now I'm going to quickly show you all of these materials. Now again, you can swap some of these out, but this is everything that I used for this build. Now I obviously used a lot of paints, which you will see in a moment. There's no super unique features here. I will say that I did use some Gemspark wall. I don't use this very often. And I also used some silly pink balloon, as well as some cloud and some pumpkin and some confetti wall. Now these are nothing super new and you may be very familiar with them, but this is what I put together for this build. Again, guys, if you are interested in seeing this in more detail, feel free to pause here and take a quick look. If you have any questions about any of the materials, if I'm not running through them, or if you don't know what they are, just leave me a question or a comment down below, and I will definitely get back to you. So as you can see, guys, there's nothing too crazy here, but again, we have a full chest of materials, so we did use a variety of things, and like I said, a lot of paint, but let's just go to the build and I will highlight some of the cool features. Alright folks, so here we are at our Adventure Time build. Now as you can see, I had to build this on a floating island because on this map we do not have a ton of room. We are stacked full of builds, but basically the tree fort in its entirety is, well, it's pretty big. As you can see, we have a lot of features, some clouds, a lot of custom little details, and a lot of different features, but ultimately I think it kind of captured the essentials, and I really like the way that this turned out considering I've never even watched the show. Now, obviously, the first thing you're going to notice is this is a very large tree with a lot of different features. I think a lot of people get a little bit, well, deterred maybe by making trees and also putting in all the details. I did have a reference image, but basically when you're going to look at this, look at all the trees and all those elements, all the leaves, all the greenery. This is all just a mix of different leaves. So this is going to be your leaf wand and or your mahogany leaf wand. And of course the tree is going to be your mahogany wand as well as your living wood wand. So you can mix it up however you want. I mean, the details here I think look pretty good, but you can just paint all that brown and it will look decent enough. The leaves here are a combination of green paint for the main tree and then a lime green paint for the sides or smaller trees that are kind of like little huts. But again, you can see it's a fairly generic build in terms of what we're using. It just has a large scale. Now, if you don't believe me, I'll pull up the map and you can see it's, you know, it's pretty big. It's not a small build. I think the cool feature for me really is just how these branches look and how these little clouds look, but also adding some little details like this sort of chimney. Now again, this is just going to be your copper plating with a piece of brown painted bamboo wall. This over here is going to be very similar and have a few different details. So again, we have the bamboo as the wall in the background, and here we actually went with some platinum brick wall and painted it brown as well. So again, nothing too crazy, a mix of copper plating again. I think this is actually some tin plating just to give it some separation. You could do a lot more detail work here if you wanted. We added some platforms and a couple of pieces of chain, but just something to make it look a little bit different. So off to the right here, guys, we have a small little room, and it's got a couple of little details and features that I want to highlight. So this is simply a little tire swing that anyone can make. It's very easy. You simply get some silly pink balloon or silly balloon of any kind, and you just, well, put it into a circle shape, and it's really easy. I painted this one white because that was what it looked like in the reference image, but you could also obviously do a black tire swing or any color that you want. The other interesting feature here that is in a few other rooms is this green wall. Now, this is actually something that I thought I wasn't sure I liked initially, but the more I kind of blended it in, the more I liked it. Now this is a wavy dirt wall that is painted green, and I think it really adds a nice feature. You can see we've used it in a couple different places, and I just think it kind of adds a little bit more detail, and again, it fits the reference image very well. All right, so at the top left of our build, we have this boat that is, for some reason, growing out of a tree. So this little boat, guys, is just again in the reference image, and I know I'm going to get asked a lot of questions about, well, the umbrella, so I will explain it as best as I can. So I use pumpkin wall here on the bottom, as well as actual pumpkin blocks on the top to make the umbrella. Now, there's a lot of ways you could do this. You could hammer it into different positions, but then we simply painted a combination of orange and yellow because that's what the umbrella colors were in the reference image. But again, this little umbrella design I've used in a couple of different builds, and I'm actually liking the way it turns out. I don't know if I love this platform going across, but overall, I think it kind of fits the features and the molding of an umbrella. So I don't know, let me know what you guys think of this umbrella, if you think it's umbrella-y enough, but in my opinion, I think it's doing its job and kind of looks interesting. And finally, guys, one interesting feature of this build is these sort of windows. Now, this is where we used those offline GemSpark blocks and we painted those gray or white, I believe. And basically all you were doing is alternating different offline gems. So this would be an offline amber GemSpark wall, and this would be an offline, ruby one or diamond one. It doesn't matter, whatever color you want, but so long as they alternate, you'll have a cool sort of window pattern once you sort of paint them on, and it kind of gives it the look of an, well, offline or turned off window that isn't lit up. And I kind of like the feature. It's sort of a detail I've been playing a little bit around with, and I'm sort of liking the way it pans out. Now that sort of covers all of the details in this build that I wanted to highlight. Now, one thing I do also want to say is that this build was a request from someone in my Twitch chat. So if you're not familiar with the channel here, guys, I do stream live every day on Twitch except for Wednesdays and Sundays, and you can usually find me streaming around 2 p.m. Eastern time. So if you ever want to come check out a build live, that is the place to find me. All right, guys, so with that said, let's check out our second build. All right, folks, so here we are at our second build, and I will, of course, walk you through all of the materials and some of the sort of decision-making process that went along with actually designing this build. Now, as I said, this is going to be Stark Tower from the Avengers series. It was a pretty interesting build to make, and interestingly enough, despite the size of the build and the sort of overall complexity that it looks like there is, we didn't actually use that many materials. So as you can see, a lot of different GemSpark walls, which we don't typically use. We also use some purple balloon wall, silly purple balloon wall, which again is not a common material I use. And then we only use really 3 different paints. We did use some pearlstone brick, as well as some GemSpark, which I don't often use. We also obviously use a few logic gates, as you can see. We used some slime platforms, which was new, lead brick, and some adamantite beam. And then we used a few red lights here and there just to sort of complement the way the build looks. But again, guys, you can see this is really basic stuff. We didn't use a lot of crazy materials. The mahogany beam is also something I don't use too often, but in this case was just something I thought would fit really well. So again, guys, I invite you to pause here just to check out all of these materials. If you don't know what a material is, guys, or if you have a question, definitely just leave me a comment down below and I will definitely get back to you. All right, so with those materials covered, guys, let's get to the build. All right, folks, as you can see, we're at the sort of base of our, well, tower, and we've made this build again on a kind of just very blocky floating island because it's just a lot easier to do that when I'm building in this world. But as you can see, there's a lot of complexity in terms of just visually, but the build itself was not actually that difficult to make. Now, there's a lot of features that I think you guys will have questions about, but basically we went with some pearlstone around on the base just to give it sort of that sparkly look. We went with our mahogany beams here just to sort of make it stand out, and we went with a ton of different windows with different sizes. So the illusion here that we're trying to get is to have a bunch of windows. These are supposed to be sort of entrances and doors that you would come in. And really here we just use a lot of our different GemSparks, and we painted them different colors to make them look like they were lit up. So most of these are painted gray, and the ones that are meant to look like they're, well, on and there's people working or something is just these white painted ones. I think the effect is actually pretty good, but let me know what you think. Do these look like windows or does it look like something else, just a very splotchy thing? Again, it's hard to tell maybe up close, but I think it does the trick. Now again, the base design for this, guys, was just meant to look like, well, the base of a tower, so we didn't want to do anything too crazy. But as we move up, you can start to really sort of see the shape, and we kept a lot of this the same. So, we used a couple of different blocks of materials, but basically a lot of windows, some of them lit, and this is where we actually used our slime platforms. They're a bit thicker, and they actually have a really nice clean line to them, and I really like the way that these interact with the rest of the build. So something that I think just kind of adds a nice detail and feature without being, really apparent in your face. Now, at the top of the build, this is where we use our silly purple balloon wall here. It kind of just gives us this background layer that it's supposed to be like a helipad or something. I don't really know. You look at the tower, Avenger Tower, it has this sort of thing here, and we used our slime blocks or our slime platforms yet again, just to sort of make an outline. And again, it looks pretty good. We then also laced in a few different walls here. I believe this is another Gemspark wall, just to give it sort of streaky look to it, or a stripy look to it. Here we actually used a combination of fencing with again, our platform on top. And then we used some shelf here. I believe this is just wood shelf painted gray, and it kind of gives it a cool little look and looks like a fence that you might hold on to if you're walking along the top. Now, speaking of the top, again, we used the same sort of technique with the fence and the platforms that I think hammered into the bottom position, along with a bunch of mahogany beams. And again, this just gives it another really cool topper effect. We also played around here with some of the windows. Again, you can see we're using different Gemspark blocks. And again, in between, we're using a lot of these platforms, these slime platforms, and it just has a really cool look. Now, for the main part here, you're going to see that your eye probably gets drawn to this because of the color. So we went with a different sort of layering here, where we actually put in the mahogany beam again, just vertically. And then we added alternating layers of each kind of Gemspark wall. So here we have the blue one, and here we have the white one. Again, these are offline, and they just kind of add a nice little feature. We then allowed for horizontal opening here, so this is not fully connected, so it gives it a bit of a thicker horizontal line. So we use the diamond Gemspark wall and the diamond Gemspark blocks to go across this way. And then we just used more diamond Gemspark to make the A. Now, the shaping this was a bit of a pain. I think it has the right effect. Initially, I was trying to get a sort of circular shape, much closer to what you would actually see in the movie. However, that's a bit tricky here given all the additional features I have, and I think it actually would have ruined the build a bit more in terms of just the way it looked visually. So this was a much cleaner way of doing it. And again, guys, something I do want to reiterate is that while this is a rather large build and looks complex, it actually really wasn't too hard to put together once we had the base done. I mean, this tower part was fairly straightforward. Getting the shape took a little bit of time, but after that, it was really straightforward because everything's kind of the same. You just kind of start repeating the same patterns, and you end up with a really cool design. Now, again, guys, the windows actually probably took me the longest time because you need to get these patterns going, which means you have to alternate each piece. So yeah, this is a bit of an undertaking, as are the windows down here. So if you ever do try to replicate this, guys, I will say get ready to do a lot of window building. Guys, the last detail I'm going to cover here is, as you can see, these sort of support beams. I wanted to make it look a little bit different, so a lot of this is going to be bamboo surrounded by our pearl stone brick, and it looks just fine, but I wanted to change that up and sort of make the materials a little bit different as we entered each layer of the tower. So in the second level, you can see we have our logic gates with the logic lamps connected, and then we have some different bricks here. So this is going to be our ebonstone brick, and in between that is going to be some more of our adamantite beam. And I just kind of like the way this looks on this level. So on the third level, you can see we sort of brought back in the first level with the bamboo and the pearl stone brick. However, we use some palladium column just to bracket it and give it a little bit more shape. And I do think this gives a nice illusion for the build. But again, guys, it's a little bit tricky when you do something like this because we're using so much texture and detail that I don't want things to get lost. But as I said, guys, the build itself, other than making all these windows, wasn't actually too bad to put together. And you can find this one online, guys, as a speed build. You should see links to these in the description below. All right, folks, so there we go. There is our Adventure Time and our Stark Tower builds covered. I hope this gives you some insights into all of the sort of design elements that I use, as well as, of course, all of the materials. Now, as I said throughout the video, if you have any questions about any of the materials that I use or how I might have done something that I maybe didn't explain in detail, definitely leave me a comment down below, guys, and I will get back to you. Now, again, guys, you can find both of these builds as speed builds already uploaded to our channel. So if it helps, you can go check those out to see how it all came together. But honestly, guys, the whole idea here is that you get some sense of how I made something, take a shot at it, see what you come up with, and of course, get creative because that's the whole point. And with that, we're done. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did. As always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.